G'day everyone, I'm artist Wayne Dowsent and welcome to my ANZAC portrait series. This is my latest ANZAC portrait featuring 90-year-old Mr. Keith Alwyn Bent. And I'll be unveiling this portrait with Keith himself at our ANZAC portrait exhibition in Delegate in a couple of weeks, and I can't wait. So ladies and gentlemen, very proud to be sharing with you all part 2 of our interview with Mr. Keith Alwyn Bent.
We were airlifted in the old DC-2s. They turned it over the gap, so they must obviously, in the Kokoda area, it must come along and there must be this bit of a gap there where the planes could go through. It was tree-level flying so that, you know, there was the Japanese planes, which were sort of still active in those times, would have pounced on it, you see. So anyway, got to Dumpu, got our gear, and we'd been equipped with, I think it was 3 days emergency rations for us to relieve the unit that we were taking over from. The valley, the Ramu Valley in itself, at the stage where the Dumpu strip was, would be probably up to 1 kilometre wide, and on either side of the strip was the Kunai grass, which was head high sort of thing, and nothing other than that. So anyway, we headed up into the Finisterres, and as I say, on the walk up, every 50 minutes we would arrive at where the salvos had established a coffee centre. You either had your own mug, or they would provide you one, which might be an old tin of coffee and milk, and they had sort of made a bit of a handle thing on it, and they'd give you that. So that we didn't reach that destination that day. We had to spend overnight. The next day we got to the troops that we were relieving, with lots of "you'll be sorry," you know, "you'll be sorry." But anyway, yes, well, I might mention that from where we then were established, this is the 2nd 10th Battalion itself, where it was established that we could look out, but you could see the Shaggy Ridge. Shaggy Ridge was a one-man front. The fighting there was pretty ferocious. The 10th Battalion, which incidentally had been nicknamed the Fighting 10th, and we were given a lesser steep hill to, you know, than the 2nd 12th Battalion that copped this Shaggy Ridge. And you know, you could sort of almost pick out the track where they'd sort of come up, and then they'd have to wind back and eventually get up. And as I say, it was one man on the front there. Well then, the Nips had burrowed in and created these cavernous holes in the side of the mountain, and you know, they'd pop up, obviously, as we were told. Our 12 blokes would tell us that they'd pop up and, you know, get rid of a few rounds and then down in again. And but anyway, to send grenades down was a waste of time, so they had to get the fuzzy wuzzies to bring up these bamboo sticks, and where they could get cord through and attach to an instantaneous grenade, and then they'd put the, as described to me by the mate of the 12th, that they'd put it down beside the hole here, they could see that, but they'd move it along, and once it got in front of the opening, they'd jack the string, and the instant explosion and wreak a bit of damage on them. And that's how they got rid of them out of there. Our offensive started afternoon of the first day, run into opposition, which forced the withdrawal. I just might add that I never smoked until the first night that we were in action up in the Finisterres, when we occupied a deserted area of the Japs, and the stench and stink and that was just so bad that this boomerang plane came over and dropped these comforts, and in it was a packet of Bull Durham tobacco and some of their cigarette papers that don't even have gum on them. You're supposed to just twist the end of them or something. Anyway, overnight there was a constant barrage from the 9-mile snipers, which we used to call the 25-pounders, into the positions. The observation blokes, like they got a range on it, and then these shells would come over. But unfortunately there was a drop short, and that was where we lost the first of we blokes that went in from the Light Horse, and his name was Jack Stewart, and he lived at Bombala. And the drop short, shells exploded in the tree, and he was in this trench, sort of at the foot of a tree, or sort of dug in a bit of protection hole sort of thing. Yeah, but he never stood a chance, because the bit of shrapnel went in one ear and come out the other side of his head. A chap that was in our unit, well, it was our unit, but he was in a different platoon to what I was, of course, but I knew him well, and because my job included in being reasonably close to the perimeters put out of the night, we were able to pull him out, and then the stretcher bearers came and got him, but there was nothing could be done for him because he'd gone there. The next day, that particular area that the Nips were defending, they'd deserted, but then they'd established themselves a bit further on. And herein again, it was late, or fairly late in the evening, when contact was made, and in the 7th Light Horse we joined up in, it was C Squadron, but it was comprised of the Bombala Troop, the Cooma Troop, Canberra Troop and the Bungendore Troop. And in the Bungendore Troop were these twins, and they bore the nickname of Boots and Saddle. And anyway, poor bloody Boots was killed. Well, it wasn't very long after that the Padre, he would say, almost up in the front too, but he got the other twin and he took him back to battalion headquarters because he feared that he might do something rash, you know. And, yeah. So anyway, continued on, I suppose, for a week or more, this sort of thing. Be held up, shelling, and then they'd would vacate the position and then you'd go. But there'd be the odd bugger that'd try and get a few shots away at someone or something like that.
Could you tell me the story the other day when you came over to Sandra's? You talked about the brothers Jim and Ben and about the Jap sniper. Would you? Where was that?
That was in New Guinea.
Okay.
That was in the Finisterre Range.
Could you tell us about that story?
Yes, well, it's my position made it so that, you know, I wasn't seeking the shelter that they were, but they had been pinned down by this sniper and they were sheltering between this pretty big rock, and they couldn't make a move, or if any of the other lads near them you know, exposed themselves in any manner of form, the sniper had let fly, you see. So as I probably mentioned there before, that it was recognised, you know, that Jim was the better shot of the two. So there was a pause, which I observed. There was a pause there, sort of with them, and then the next thing I saw was that Ben had moved to the left, and Jim had moved to the right. And then I suppose it must have been something voice that was to indicate that then that he was to just expose himself so briefly and come back, and at the same time Jim done the same thing on the right hand side. Well, when Ben first moved out, well, of course the sniper let fly, but then by that time Jim was out and he spotted where he was firing from in the tree, so he just up and let him have it and exited one jab.
It's a pretty brave thing to do, isn't it?
My word.
And the two brothers doing that together.
Yeah. So anyway, that finished, and then we come back down into the valley and established a resident camp. And from there there was still a little bit of patrol work went on, until eventually one morning I was informed that there was going to be a patrol go out. There was this Bill Kosh and myself for the 2-6 that went on it, besides the other 17 ORs. And first day wading in mud up to our hips sort of thing, and then the next day in the Soldier River, and then on the third day up until we found where the Japs had established all these, you know, fortifications and so forth. But where we could look down on Finchhaven and just find out what activity was going on down there. And I suppose probably a week after that we were informed that there was going to be a concert, and the entertainer was a chap you probably may have heard of him in your time, but Isidore Goodman, the pianist. He put a beautiful recital on. We were all at that, and then the CO came onto this sort of erected stage and said, "Oh, you're to be all ready at 0600 in the morning, because that's when we start going out to go down to lay." So we got on we all ended up at lay, and then the boat we got on there to come back to Australia was the Katoomba, and it was an old tourist boat too. I think it had been commandeered by the Navy, and the Sergeant Henson came to me, he said, "Well look," he said, "they're short of signals and they want the 6th platoon do the messages, you see, which was with the lamp. And he said, "Do you feel up to it?" And I said, "Oh, well," I said, "I suppose we can give it a go." So between the two of us, we sort of managed to get away with it, but there were a couple of messages that come in warning of submarines in the area, and like a full alert to be on, but nothing ever transpired, so we got back to Brisbane okay. Went up to the home where we lived and met up with the rest of the family, and yes, well then the rest of the leave didn't turn out as it should have done, and I got a touch of that malaria. So it made me AWOL. I was a week late, but I thought, oh well, what the heck. So when I got back to Marrickville, I had to front up there, and was asked, did I wish to be dealt with there, or did I want to go back to my own CO? And I opted out for the latter. And he was a most understanding man anyway. And yeah, well, naughty, naughty, don't do it again. Yeah. Well, I said, I hope I don't get malaria again anyway. But I did, because a couple of mornings later, when they took us out to the rifle field and all that, and well, I'm not sure, 3 or 4 bullets. I was lying down and I got off, but as I say, the next thing I wake up, I'm in Green Slopes Hospital, and oh dear, it's a terrible thing, you know. You feel as if you've got about 200 brass bands knocking away in your head. Eventually left there and then back up to Cairns, up to the Atherton Tableland. Yeah, it was bang crash then into training, and then we started invasion training. There's a sort of a bay there where they took us in and simulated a landing attack. And I remember, whatever it was, I don't know, still to this day I'll never know, that I'm racing out, and anyway I tripped, there's something snagged under my foot, and then I sort of, only ran about a foot of water I suppose, and I went down. I inadvertently must have pulled the power and control of the wireless on, you see. You normally on receive, but as I went down I must have pulled it on, you see, put it on transmit, and of course I let fly. It's the old proverbial 4-letter.
So what transpired after you finished doing your training, your invasion training?
Oh, yeah, well of course we were down in Cairns doing that invasion training, so here and again it was a case of back up to the Tablelands, and we weren't there, I suppose, all that long when we were prepared to leave. We knew we were going overseas, we weren't real sure where, but anyway, this time we went to Brisbane, so we embarked from Brisbane. Now the particular boat that I went on was what they called a landing ship troops, LST, and it had up the sides of each side of the boat, and it had these pontoon things that went up, you see. So we go aboard and the boat moves out around near Moreton Bay sort of thing, and it started to rain. So the powers that be thought, oh well, we'll fix the rain and we just had the stretchers there and then blankets and raincoat over us and everything. So they got these tarps and sort of attached them to the top of the pontoons down to about half the ship. Well, there was a fair bit of noise and the next thing, this thing's being pulled over my face and I thought, God, what's going on here? Eventually, free of it, happened to look up onto the bridge, and the doc's up on the bridge, and there's three blokes there with him. And so it didn't take long. News got around was that, yeah, this was a good idea to keep us nice and dry, but they still had the diesel motor running, which was exhausting out onto the pontoon and back in onto us, and that was these blokes had just about collapsed, and the doc's bringing them to up in the fresh air and everything. So from there on, I might add here too that my bed run from the side of the ship in like that, and that was all right. Got up the next morning and convoy started, and then I got horribly seasick, and I never left the bed, and I was close to the rail, so it was just shocking, and it stayed that way right until we got to Milne Bay. That Morotai, it was a daily occurrence that you attend a sand table where they had arranged the whole foreshore at Balikpapan where we're going to land. So we knew exactly, well, particularly NCOs and everything, knew exactly what to look for, what to see as soon as we landed and where you were to go. So anyway, okay, a bit of a change in transport, and instead of on this LST I've been so sick on, I get on what was known as an American Army personnel destroyer, and the headquarters of the headquarters company were all grouped on that, and it was on that you know, we had a pretty good time. For instance, you could buy a carton of American Lucky Strike or Chesterfield or cigarettes for the equation of 3 shillings and twopence in those days. So anyway, yeah, so we set sail and of course got down, came down the Macassar Strait and positioned off Macassar so as that we were awake quite early on the morning of the 1st, and it was you know, such a splendid view, because the Air Force was going backwards and forwards, explosions, and you could hear the explosion, but more so you could see the fire from the oil tanks and everything going up. And anyway, next thing, into the boat. Well, yeah, well, there was a vast armada, as I say. I was on the second wave, but the first wave, it's going in. And so, and the Shropshire was the warship, the big warship that was there. And it was shelling the foreshore, but it was raising its range the whole time as we got in closer. They were lefty, who never had much protection or anything, and then bang in and drop down, you jumped out and on your way. But yeah, the bombing and exposure of the oil tanks and that, and everything was very, very spectacular. I had this young chap, and he was with me, and well, we were with this Captain Sanderson, and anyway, we decided to make a rush to this bit of shelter because there was a bit of fighting just not all that far ahead of us, you see. But before we got there, I heard this plump, you know, Hackney as we called him. he says to me, I'm hit. And I said, well, keep going. He said, we've only got to get to the shelter over here. We got to the damn shelter, and I said to Hackney, so, okay, I said, where are you, where you hit? And he wouldn't look, you see, but he said, the blood's all coming down the side here. And I said to him, I said, rub your hand down there. He rubbed his hand down there, and I said, have a look at it. He said, it's wet. Yes, I said, that went through your water bottle. And I said, it's water leaking on you. Anyway, we were able to watch the, there was a hut sort of immediately in front of it. There were a few Japs coming out of that, one thing and another, and they seemed to be going down as they come out, and, but there was still resistance there, and this chap with the flamethrower got up there, and that belted a couple out, and yeah, they come out screaming their heads off and bang. Yeah. And anyway, that was getting on the approaches up to Hill Parramatta. Well, so okay, that was the objective. We stayed there, so weapon pits and trenches and everything was all started, the perimeters were marked out, and so then comes dark, but then the Shropshire is firing these starlight shells and one thing and another. They were bursting, and they were, you know, it was more or less like daytime. So the perimeter, and particularly the one where the mate Herb Walters was, and he was out, and they took count there the next morning. They had 6 pigs, 4 Japs, and 8 monkeys. So there wasn't much chance of anything getting through in that particular area. That was mainly all thanks to this, you know, to this star shells being fired and what, you know. It'd been just that period when it wasn't there. Anyway, didn't take much of a noise, and bang, everything went. And as previously mentioned, had achieved our objective, Hill Parramatta, and Gold gone out to the intelligence corporal, and I also received word that I had to come back to company headquarters as Captain Sanderson wanted to have this bit of a conference about things. So anyway, we were back, we were sitting on this bomb crater when the sound of aeroplane engines were heard, and I can't say that I took any notice much of that, and so anyway, the next thing, Sanderson says, into the hole, and he dives down into the bomb crater. Actually, wasn't actually all that deep, I suppose, when all said and done, but anyway, he went down into it. Then Carl Hoskin, the intelligence lad, he went down, and of course, me with the wireless on my back, I was on top of that, on top of Carl. Well, the concussion of one of the bombs, which Captain Sanderson estimated that the bomb was probably a 250 pounder, and we emerged from that. Well, Sanderson was all right, but both Gareth Hoskins and myself, we were hemorrhaging pretty badly from the nose and from the ears. So then it was the third day that the unit goes down into the township of Balikpapan to clean it out. And well, I know that and Aki, by this time the tanks are in, you see, so we hitched a ride on this tank, and eventually we get to this docking area, and that's where we sort of become stationary, where the platoon headquarters was established. A week later, one of the Bombala boys that had gone in with us, he was on guard duty, and we were warned time and time again never to wear any Japanese footwear. This chap's on guard duty, and you know, the victim was rather foolish, because as soon as he was challenged, he switched torch on, and of course Bombala fellow looked straight down, saw the Japanese hand, bang, and just shot one of his own men. That's war. Yeah, well, that was about it. Well, it was a long damn wait then before. Oh, of course, there was a fair bit of mopping up done, and one thing and another, and then we just went to a static camp, and it was just getting established in that, and news comes then that she's all over.